Welcome. Well, you're at home with Jim and Joy, and we are delighted that you have tuned us in and brought us into your home. You are an important part of our EWTN family, and we would love to hear from you. So give us a jingle during this very live broadcast at 1-800-221-9460. If you're calling and you're outside of North America, you can reach us at area code 205-271-2980. You always can send us an email, jimandjoy@ewtn.com. Well, today we have two wonderful people, Stephen Schwartz and also Kiki Lattimer. Now, Stephen Schwartz is a professor emeritus of philosophy from the University of Rhode Island, and Kiki Lattimer, they have co-authored a book together. And but Kiki Lattimer has written a book called Mixed Feelings About Abortion. But Stephen Schwartz and Kiki Lattimer have written a book called Understanding Abortion. Right. And so it's a beautiful book, extremely informative, all about both sides.
Yeah.
Pro-choice, pro-life, presented in an extremely very bright and enlightening way of just to bring the facts, bring the truth, bring the beauty of the conversation, how it can go down.
I think the title is Understanding Abortion, and then the subtitle is From Mixed Feelings to Rational Thought, Schwarz and Lattimer. So they both together have written that book. And it is, I've read a lot of pro-life books, but there's no book like this book.
Right.
And so we're going to tell you why this book is unique and is something that can really be given to our pro-choice friends and family, as well as pro-life people. So you're going to be very interested in this. You're going to want to hear about it. But Joe, we had a wonderful weekend.
We did. Weekends always seem to go by so fast.
They really do. And one of the highlights for us was praying with our parish family, renewing our consecration to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, which we've been doing as a parish family for the last 5 years. And 5 years ago, Father Basil was the one who began this in our parish and called us to this. And so we spent a novena in prayer, examining ourselves, repentance, faith, Holy Eucharist, and then coming and entrusting ourselves to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, to the glory of Jesus, for the deepening of our relationship with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. When we began this 5 years ago, Father Basil decided, he didn't tell anybody, but he wrote the name of every parishioner on paper. It must have been a thin piece of paper, like a scroll. And he wrote everybody's name in the parish. It's a large parish. It's the cathedral church. And then he rolled that up, and he has a gold heart, which he put all the names in and hung it around the statue of Our Lady.
Yes.
And so every time you look at Our Lady and she has this heart on her, your name's in there. Everybody's name is in there. And from that moment 5 years ago, and we consecrated ourselves to the Immaculate Heart, people began to report blessings and a beautiful presence of Jesus and things happening in their lives. And so we reconsecrated ourselves this weekend. And it's amazing when you do that, just a renewal of the presence of Our Lady, which is so very, very special. It's kind of like she's around, you know, she's touching up everything in your life. And as we sang, I think it was the opening hymn at our parish, it was like, you know, praise to the Lord. Let's say praise to the Lord, the Almighty, the King of creation. And I was praising the Lord. I felt like Our Lady was right alongside of me, and that she was praising her Son, and that we were doing that together. I mean, it's just one of the impressions that I had. And one of the things to me is I was always so cautious, and I didn't understand about consecration to Jesus through Our Lady or the Immaculate Heart. I just didn't get it. I didn't get why, you know, that is helpful. But when you do come in, you know, and allow her in, amazing things take place, and your relationship with Jesus is so enhanced, and your understanding of the faith and the ministry to yourself, this entrustment is just a beautiful thing.
Well, and you know, I'm a convert, so I didn't always get our Blessed Mother, and so when I came into the Catholic Church, I really had a beautiful journey with her, and it is deepening. It is I can't explain it any other way. It's a game changer in your spiritual journey. It really is. And so if you're thinking, I love Jesus with all my heart, soul, mind, and strength, I don't need his mother, you know, I got this, me and Jesus have this, and which some people think. But why not have his mother, the one who loves him so much, asking her to pray for you, that you then would fall more in love with Jesus and serve Jesus with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. It's just a game changer.
I did want to give a shout out to my sister Camille, who's had like an amazing year, her 60th wedding anniversary, her first great grandbaby, David, right? And then it's her birthday. So happy birthday to my sister. You and Tony, your husband, are just models for us. Coming up next, Mixed Feelings About Abortion, Understanding Abortion. It's a book that you need to know about. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Plenty more to come.
Welcome back. Well, you are an important part of our EWTN family, and we would love to hear from you. So if you have a question for today's guests, Dr. Stephen Schwartz and Kiki Lattimer, give us a jingle right here during the live broadcast at 1-800-221-9460. If you're calling and you're outside of North America, you can reach us at area code 205-271-2980. You can always send us an email, jimandjoy@ewtn.com, and hopefully we will use your question or your comment right here on the air. Well, today we're talking to lovely people from the Northeast, with the great hope you're all going to get back with these storms that are out there. We have Kiki Lattimer and Dr. Stephen Schwartz, and they both co-authored a book called Understanding Abortion. The website to go to is mixedfeelingsaboutabortion.com. Well, we want to welcome the both of you to At Home with Jim and Joy, and we're delighted that you're here.
Thank you.
Well, Kiki, we'll go to you first, and we want you to tell our family back home a little bit about Kiki, how you came to this place in space and time, and why you hooked up this wonderful man of God in writing this book.
Well, first of all, I'm a mother of 4 now adult children and grandmother of 9. I've been a coach for storytelling for years, and I'm currently employed by Holy Apostles Seminary and College in Cromwell, Connecticut. I co-teach homiletics, so it's a very exciting place to be. Back in, oh goodness, a million years ago, I was a student with Steve. I'm a convert to Catholicism, so at that point I was Episcopalian, I was pro-choice, took his ethics class, and learned a lot about the abortion issue, and then later became his teaching assistant, and then eventually we came to write the book based on our experience in the classroom. So that's sort of in a nutshell how I got here.
I knew you were a convert. I didn't know you had Episcopal roots, but I didn't ask you about that in the back because Bishop Lattimer and Bishop Ridley were like renowned Anglican bishops back in the 1500s. So that makes sense with a name like that. You got some roots in the Episcopal Anglican tradition.
I don't know if they're roots, but
Well, you got the name, that's for sure.
Well, Dr. Stephen Schwartz, why don't you tell our family at home a little bit about yourself?
Myself, that's a long story. I'll make it brief. I was born in Germany in 1932, just before Hitler came to power. My parents were among the very few who saw the evil. Most people didn't see it, so they got out as soon as possible, and after a long journey, my father served in the French army against the Nazis, and then we ended up in the United States in 1941. My father taught school there, and I went to school, and now I'm teaching, or just retired from teaching at the University of Rhode Island, and I've always been interested in philosophy, and particularly in ethics, and within ethics, particularly in the abortion issue, because I thought it was an especially cruel thing to do, to kill a little baby who was absolutely helpless. So I was very interested in that issue, and also why people might want to take the other side. Why would you not take that side? And so I decided to research it, and I also used it in my class, and the book came out of the class.
Now, your father was an academic.
Yes.
Had a close relationship with
Dietrich von Hildebrand?
von Hildebrand.
Yes.
Yeah, please tell
My
us.
father was a student of von Hildebrand and kind of came to philosophy through von Hildebrand. They became very close friends, and von Hildebrand was my godfather. Wow. And he was sort of like a second father to me, a philosophical father, and informed me in many, many different ways, including his love of truth, and really the defining characteristic, his giving the right response. So.
Now, your father had association with one who is a saint now.
Edith Stein.
Edith Stein.
Do you want that story?
Yeah.
Briefly.
Edith Stein, in the spring of 33, after I was born, my father and Edith Stein were colleagues at the University of Münster, and they used to meet regularly every week for serious discussions. But before those discussions took place, Edith Stein always made it a point to go to the baby room, me, and pick up the baby and hold the baby. So I was held by Edith Stein.
That is so
It was
beautiful.
a great blessing, and deep, that I can't be grateful enough for.
Well, what blessing is upon you. Well, it's wonderful to have you both here. Just to know you personally, I mean, you're just beautiful personalities and so dedicated to our Lord and to the church. But lay out for us, if you would, understanding abortion from mixed feelings to rational thought. What's the premise of the book? What are you trying to do within it? You know, kind of what makes it unique?
Well, what makes it, I think, primarily unique is the fact that pro-life people don't want to read pro-choice books. I mean, I don't read pro-choice books, you probably don't, and probably many of your viewers don't. And the same on the other side, pro-choice people don't want to read pro-life books. So it's really difficult to have any kind of dialogue between the two sides. So based on what we did in the classroom, which at a secular university where we presented the topic of abortion, giving all of the pro-life strongest arguments and all of the pro-choice strongest arguments, and never letting the classroom know what our personal stand was. We presented the facts as they are and let people use their rational thought to come to a conclusion, hopefully understanding that abortion is wrong.
Yeah.
What we found in the classroom was that when we went in, 10% were pretty strongly pro-life, and 10% were very strongly what I call pro-abortion. But the 80% in the middle were what I call pro-choice by default. They didn't really know the abortion issue at all, but because of the culture, they're pro-choice. Right. And what we found over the course of the 6 weeks that we do the course is that 80%, half of them at least, became pro-life. The other half were no longer comfortable with their pro-choice position, and while they hadn't quite jumped ship yet, they no longer considered abortion a good option. They were uncomfortable with it, and they were moving towards pro-life. Of the strongly pro-abortion people, half of them had become moved to no longer thinking abortion was a good thing. So that was a huge change. And of the people that were pro-life to begin with, they were now stronger in their pro-life position. They now understood what the arguments on the other side were. I think everyone developed a greater level of compassion, both for the child, but also for the woman, that this was not a simple issue, that this was a difficult issue for everyone involved. And so I think a lot of compassion came out of it.
So there's this big middle ground, even with the students. You say 10%, very committed pro-life, 10% on the other side committed. But and I think that's so true. I'm deeply committed, but I was on that continuum too. Most of the people are on a continuum of some kind. They really don't know what the arguments are. And like you say, it's kind of mixed feelings, but how much rational thought do we have? So is that what you were trying to do? Understand the philosophical foundations for each one of your positions. You may not even know those, and then really decide, do I really buy into this myself?
Yeah. The mixed feelings can be accounted for in probably several ways. One way is that the various elements are in there, but they're kind of mixed and not in any kind of rational order. And what the book tries to do is to put them in rational order. Here's the pro-choice view and two avenues towards pro-choice. And here's the pro-life view, and partly in counter to those pro-choices. So the arguments are set there in a logical order so that the truth is allowed to shine through. Ultimately, the message of the book is, we don't want to tell you what to believe. The truth should speak for itself. If you preach something to a person, here's what I believe and you should believe that, there will always be the suspicion that there's something being held back. You know, he wants to convince us of that, so he's holding something back. We're not holding anything back. We're giving the pro-choice argument as strongly as possible. I researched the material very carefully, and they boil down to two main approaches. And the pro-life argument is largely a response to those two approaches. The main thing for the pro-life side, I want to get that in a couple of times, the reality of the child. That's the thing you have to start with, in the middle, at the end. And all the other issues like the hard cases, rape and incest and legal, all of it depends on clearly seeing the reality of the child in the womb. Abortion kills that child. That's the basic thing. Now, why the reality of the child in the womb, I have arguments for that, and we can get into that.
Yeah. Well, you start your book, we have an introduction to it and you speak about it, but I notice pretty soon thereafter you're going through fetal development. And so you're saying if we're going to have a conversation about abortion and what abortion is and what it does, obviously the woman's involved, the mother is involved, but obviously the child is involved. So who is this child? Is that a religious issue, a philosophical issue? Is it a medical scientific issue? How do we establish the humanity of the child? And if we establish the humanity, does that really matter? Because personhood then is a question, right? Maybe some would accept this is human but not a person. Roe versus Wade seems to do that. Doesn't seem to deny the humanity of the unborn, but it says it's not a person. So how do we establish that? I mean, that's easier said than done.
I'll say a couple of things to that. First of all, it's not a religious issue. And if pro-life is presented as a religious issue, you lose right from the beginning, because then religion is your business, don't impose it on others. It's not a religious issue, it's a civil rights issue. It's the question of whether this segment of humanity is going to be treated like everyone else. And the important question is the person question. And I will give the pro-choice side that much credit. The pro-choice people, Marianne Warren and Michael Tooley, they say the question of personhood is the key question, but then they get it wrong, because they say a person is someone who can think rationally, who has a sense of self, who can get on EWTN and talk. A little baby can't do that, and the baby in the womb can't do that. So they conclude that since the baby doesn't have that capacity, it's not a person. And I say distinguish being a person, functioning as a person. Functioning as a person means rational thought, being able to have a conversation, thinking about making decisions and so forth. And of course the being in the womb can't do that, but the same applies to the being right after. And one author, Michael Tooley, is at least logical and bases his pro-choice position on that being is not a person because it can't think, and then says, but the newborn baby can't think either. So we should allow killing for 3 months after birth. At least he's logical, and he brings that argument to its logical conclusion. So the important thing is to see that, yes, it doesn't function as a person, but neither does a born baby, neither does someone under total anesthesia, but they have the being of a person. And that's the crucial thing. Then there's one other thing, the sled, but I don't know whether you want that now or later.
We'll talk about the sled, how you describe size and...
The sled is an answer to a very reasonable question, but isn't there a difference? I mean, here I'm trying to equate born and preborn and say treat preborn the same way you treat born. You don't kill born, so you don't kill preborn either. Then they can ask very reasonably, isn't there a difference? Yes, there's a difference. There's a fourfold difference. Size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. The born person is generally larger than the preborn person, just like a 20-year-old is larger than a 1-year-old. Size, level of development, an older person is more developed than a younger person, but we don't say the older person is more valuable because they're more developed. Environment is simply the womb outside the womb, but where you are can't possibly make a difference as to whether you have a value or not. If you have a value in one environment, you're going to have the same value in another environment. And the other one is degree of dependency, and we're all dependent, some more, some less. And if someone is more dependent, they should get more care. So if a person has an accident, they're in an intensive care unit, they are more dependent than you and I am right now. That doesn't mean they're less of a person. That doesn't mean they should get less care. So those are the only differences. I'll repeat them. Size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. It spells out SLED. Very easy to remember.
Well, you know, we work at a pregnancy medical center. And the other day I had a client who was very abortion-minded, and we did her ultrasound and everything. And she was she was a third-year nursing student, and she knew everything. She told me she knew everything. And her thing was, she was really mad because we heard the heartbeat, and we saw the baby in the sack. And we got back into the room, and she wanted it to be a blob of tissue, because she was ready to abort a blob of tissue. And I said, but a blob of tissue doesn't have a beating heart. It is your baby. And she got really upset with the exchange, and she left. And because we want it to be what we want it to be. And it, you know, Jim describes it so beautifully. He's like, when we're deceived, and we're trying, and sometimes we don't want to know the truth. We don't want to have the argument. We want to be that 10% that's pro-choice. Like, don't tell me what I don't want to know. I know what I want it to be. Mm. How difficult that is, especially in a college environment, to bring the moral and the legal response out of another person. They're not going to move. And they're in the life of the child, and not just the life of the child, but abortion changes women forever.
I had a young woman who came to our office one of the last semesters that we taught together there. And she knocked on the office door and she said, I'd like to speak with Kiki. And I said, come in. And then she looked over at Steve and she said, he has to go.
My own office.
And we just finished the abortion issue, so he knew enough to hightail it out. Mm-hmm. And so I said, sit down. And immediately, you know, I thought, you know, what does she want from me? You know, because this is always a sort of a scary situation. Mm-hmm. And she sat down and she didn't look good to begin with. And she said, I said, you know, how can I help you? And she said, she said, you're the first person I've talked to about this. And she said, I want you to know that I had an abortion at the beginning of the semester. So before we got into the abortion issue. And she said, what I want you to understand is that in my situation, abortion was the right thing to do. Mm. And I just nodded. Yeah. And very in my mind and heart started praying, right. Like, why is she here? She said, I was dating this man, and he loved me, and I loved him, but he wasn't the one. Mm-hmm. He wasn't the one I was meant to marry. And so when I found myself pregnant, you have to understand that in this situation, being pregnant with the wrong person's child, abortion was the right thing to do. She said, my mom always told me, don't marry somebody just because you get pregnant. You know, and here I was pregnant. And so, I heard my mom's words, like, don't get married just because you're pregnant. So in my situation, she said, abortion was the right thing to do. And again, I just nodded, and I said to her, I understand. Mm. And then she said, you know, I was brought up Catholic. She said, I'm Catholic, and I've always been pro-life all my life. But she said, I just come back to college. And she said, I'm going into a medical profession, and I want to make a difference in the world. I care about people. I love people. I want to make a difference in the world. But now I was pregnant, and all of that would be lost. And so Kiki, she said, you have to understand that in my situation, abortion was the right thing to do. Mm. And again, I just nodded, and I said, I understand. And then she talked a little bit about her relationship with the boyfriend and her relationship with God and her mother. But again, she went back, and again she said to me, Kiki, you have to understand, in my situation, abortion was the right thing to do. And again, I just said, I understand. And then there was this silence, and it was one of those silences that was so deep and so painful, but I just really prayed through it, and I just heard the Holy Spirit say to me, be silent, be quiet. And so I just let that silence sit. And then finally she said, and I prayed, like, why is she here? Why has she come to me? You know, because people come for a reason. Mm-hmm. And then finally she said in a whisper, she said, I still talk to him every day. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't sure, did she mean God or did she mean the boyfriend? And I said, him? Mm-hmm. And she said, oh, the baby. Mm-hmm. Mm. She said, I knew from the very beginning that it was a little boy. I still speak to him every day. And I said, I understand. And then I said to her, what do you say to him? And she said, I tell him that I'm his mommy. I tell him that I love him. I tell him that I'm sorry. And I said, I understand. And then she said to me, with more pain than any young woman should ever have to carry, she looked at me and she said, Kiki, how long will I feel like this? No one told me that I would feel like this. And, you know, if you're pro-choice, that story should bother you, because this was a young woman who made a choice that she couldn't live with. And if you're pro-life, you obviously weep both for her and for this little boy who also lost his life. But you know, if you're Catholic, there's something else in that story. This was a beautiful Catholic woman brought up in the church. She talked to me about how she'd made her first communion, her confirmation, how she had been pro-life. You know, she had religious feelings against abortion. She had heart feelings against abortion, and she had gut feelings against abortion. But she didn't have rational thought. You know, and those feelings just didn't hold the day when she got scared. And now she had to live with this. You know, and before you mentioned about a young woman that had come to you and said, you know, maybe God will forgive me, well, you know, if I carry through. But I would say, how will you forgive yourself?
Right.
Because this
That's
woman
where they get stuck.
couldn't forgive herself.
Let's just pause at that point. A very powerful story. The name of the book is Understanding Abortion. Plenty more to come. We want to hear from you. Give us a call. Send us an email. We want you to be a part of this conversation, this healing conversation. We'll be right back. Please don't go away.
Welcome back. Well, remember that we want you to be a part of our show. So if you're at home and you're watching and you have a question for Stephen or Kiki, we want you to give us a jingle during the live broadcast at 1-800-221-9460. If you're calling and you're outside North America, you can reach us at area code 205-271-2980, and you can always send us an email, jimandjoy@ewtn.com, and hopefully we will use your question or your comment right here on the air.
Dr. Schwartz, Kiki was sharing such a powerful story. One of the things she was sharing in that was that this woman, Catholic woman, has some idea about the humanity of the unborn, but yet she's saying, you don't understand my situation, this particular situation, and that it was right or better for me to do this. So speak with us more about that position that seems to be a moral position on the choice side. You don't understand the situation. There's a higher thing here than the life of this preborn child, or it's my body, I don't have to continue this if I deem it less than the situation I'm in. I'm not articulating it very well, but what are those positions about, that they get to that place where their body or their situation supersede the life of the preborn child?
Well, there's many possible interpretations, and your question is an excellent, very deep question, but it's somewhat outside the field of philosophy and a little bit more into psychology. And my basic answer to you would be that there are probably different types of cases there. One of them would be rationalizing, that there's a tendency that we all have, a danger that we all have. We have a preconceived notion, and then we want to reach that. We want the evidence to point to an idea, to a belief system that we've already picked out, instead of being open to wherever the evidence leads us. It is, in theory, a very good thing, or in theory we say it's possible to be completely objective, but when we're in a situation, especially one of a young woman who is pregnant, where there are many dimensions to it, it can be somewhat difficult, very difficult, to be completely rational and to overcome the tendency to find the answer that you already want. But I think clear thinking is very helpful there, because to the extent that the person wants to do the right thing, really wants to do the right thing, which means giving the right response and knowing the truth and responding to that and being ready to do what is hard, what goes against what you want to do, then in that sense what we offer in the book can be of help. But ultimately, it's really a matter of the person's conscience, their heart, and their will, and are they ready to do the right thing? Right. Knowing what the right thing is a very big step in that. Yes. Then actually doing it is then a further thing, which as Christians, as Catholics, we would say is God's grace, and God works in the soul. So ultimately it's a question of God and the soul, and am I as an individual ready to do God's will, to do even the hard thing? But I think rational thought can help clear the way.
Yeah. Let's take an email, Joy.
It says a lot of Catholic politicians say they are personally opposed to abortion, but don't want to impose their religion on the general public. How can we get them to pass laws in line with their stated beliefs? And this is Bernadette from Parma, Ohio.
Can I take that? The personally opposed view is very appealing, but it doesn't hold water. Because somebody says, I'm personally opposed, and I ask them, why are you personally opposed? And it seems to me the only real answer is abortion kills a child. If that's not the answer, then we don't go any further. If that's the reason why you're personally opposed, then if you're against killing born people, why are you not also against killing preborn people? That seems to be discrimination. Oh yes, we'll protect the born, we won't protect the preborn. So if we're going to protect the born, and we're not going to say, I'm personally opposed to killing born people, but I don't want to impose that. We're not going to apply that standard to born people, then why should we apply it to preborn people? So in the end, the personally opposed doesn't hold water if it's in any way a rational thing, because abortion is the killing of a child, and the child deserves the same legal protection that you and I have. What it probably means is that I have bad feelings about abortion. And of course, if that's all it is, it doesn't amount to very, very much. So we have to again ask the question, why are you personally opposed? Is it because a woman who is pregnant is carrying a baby? The reality of the child, I was once a baby in my mother's womb. Abortion kills that child. If that's why you're against abortion, then you should say that that child deserves the same legal protection that everyone else does. It does no good to say, I'm personally opposed, but you can choose yourself. I'm personally opposed to child abuse, but if you want to abuse your children, that's okay. Nobody would say that, because they see the reality of the child who's abused. And I say the same thing here. See the reality of the child who's abused by abortion.
Yeah. And I think the other point of it is nobody's pushing a religion on someone.
Right. This not a religious question.
Is about human rights, about civil rights. This is rooted in the natural law. This is what is this entity? And this entity is a human person. And so this goes into every sphere in terms of equality.
One of us.
And you raised the point in the book about discrimination. Speak to us about that, because we usually hear that used against pro-life people, that you're discriminatory against women, but you kind of flip it in the book.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, it is a form of discrimination. You know, it says you're too small, you're not developed enough, you're too dependent, you're in the wrong place. I mean, those are, again, as Dr. Schwartz mentioned, those are the only differences between the born person and the preborn person. Size, level of development, dependency, and environment. That's your sled. Mm-hmm. So that's the only difference. So based on these superficial differences, you discriminate against one class of people.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely discrimination.
In the simplest terms, pro-choice is discrimination, because pro-choice says if you're born, you count. If you're preborn, you don't count. And that's the standard formula for every form of discrimination. Right. You have this skin skin color, you count. You have that skin color, you don't count. You are healthy, you count.
Yes.
You're handicapped, you don't count. That's the whole thing. So it's saying to the preborn child, you don't count. That's discrimination.
Or we say to the preborn child, you're not wanted. You're not wanted, and so if I want you, then I will continue this life, but I don't want you. So what
Bad timing.
Bad
Yeah.
timing, you know, and believe me, I've heard the list, I've seen the list of the rationale. Wrong guy, wrong time, wrong place. I mean, you could make it, you know, this long. However, to say, so it's I don't want to be I don't want to have an abortion. I just don't want to be pregnant. We hear that all the time. No, I really don't want an abortion. I just don't want to be pregnant. So I really don't want to continue this pregnancy.
Yeah, speak about, I want to conclude the pregnancy.
Right. Well, I think there's, you know, when I was executive director of problem pregnancy in Westerly, Rhode Island for 20 years. And I could say that almost every single woman who came in made almost the exact same statement. And that was, I have to end this pregnancy. I have to get an abortion. Because if I carry this pregnancy to term, I would love the baby too much to ever give it up for adoption. So there seems to be a clear distinction that women make between the pregnancy, which is happening to their body, and the baby, which is in their body, and they recognize at that point, I would love that baby. I would love that baby, so I have to get rid of it before I love it. You know, so many people think that an unwanted pregnancy equals an unwanted child. And years ago, when I was giving an interview at I believe it was Rhode Island College, to a group, a pro-choice group, and I inadvertently in the interview mentioned that, you know, my second pregnancy was an unwanted pregnancy. Just kind of came out in the conversation. And afterwards, this, you know, 20-year-old young man came up to me and he literally took my hands in his before I could even stop him. And he looked me right in the eye and he said to me, I am so sorry that you have an unwanted child. And I literally gasped for breath and flung his hands from mine, and I managed to squeak out, I don't have an unwanted child. And he was just as shocked as I was, because he looked at me and he said, but you said you had an unwanted pregnancy. And I said, yeah, I didn't want to be pregnant. I was back into I had had one child. I was back into my size 6 jeans. I was very happy. I didn't want to be pregnant. I said, I don't have an unwanted child. The child is a totally different thing. The pregnancy was all about me. The child was all about her. You know, I don't have an unwanted child. So many people equate those two terms, unwanted pregnancy, with an unwanted child, but the children are unwanted. And even in a very difficult case, the child can always be given up for adoption. I have my fourth child was adopted. He's not unwanted. You know, he's deeply loved. He's the greatest blessing of our family. So the idea of an unwanted child is just untrue.
It's interesting when you're in the pregnancy medical center, crisis pregnancy center, that adoption is the last option for the people coming in.
Not true.
It's to carry abortion. We have about 45% of our ladies coming in, and then if they're thinking about abortion, they're vulnerable in that area. We start speaking about adoption, and they say, well, I can never do that to my child, I can never do that. And so we get back to abortion, what abortion is and what it does, and show them the diagram and say, but you can do this, you can do this. And saying, by the way, you say child or baby, you can never do that to your child or baby. It sounds like you're bonding already with what's in you.
Yeah.
And if we could have that conversation, then we find that there's more adoption plans. Having the conversation, we find that if we have the conversation, we will win it 80% of the time. And that's what your book is about to me. It's that, can we be in an atmosphere to some degree? And nobody could be objective, but we could be fair if this is factual information, and this is your philosophical, moral, legal positions on each side. Do you think we're presenting those fairly? Because here's the key people in the field, and here's what's being said. And we're in an environment where it's not so intense, and we're in intense situations with just a few moments. But you're finding that people begin to shift. If they could just kind of look at this without all the pressure, and just look at each position, that they start moving towards pro-life or are no longer really settled in the pro-choice position. Why is that, doctor?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with whether they are open, whether their hearts are open to seeing the truth. In the last analysis, it comes down to that. Are we open to seeing the truth? Are we open to changing our minds when we have settled on one position, recognizing that there might be another position? That's really the gist of the book, that it gives both positions. So what we can do in writing the book is present the arguments, the things that point in the two directions, and ultimately it's the truth that has to speak for itself.
Do you find with the students that when you mention the area of adoption, when we're meeting with women that are coming in, it's like the last option. I'm thinking that maybe it wouldn't be the last option as people in a more academic environment and thinking about it, and they're troubled about this abortion thing. It doesn't quite feel right. The adoption seems like a better option. Are you finding that there's more people that saying that might be a good way to place a child for adoption rather than abortion?
I think the philosophical and I think common sense argument here would be, if you are so concerned about the child, if you bond with the child, you love the child so much that you wouldn't give it up for adoption, which I understand, then all the more you wouldn't kill the child. I mean, that's such a radical step that the killing is the worst thing you can do to another human being. So if you treasure that human being so much that you don't want to give it up, then in the next moment you turn around and say, but I'm willing to have it killed. I go to an abortion clinic, and what I'm effectively saying is, go kill my child. Because that's the only way to end the pregnancy at that point. You know, when you were saying we want to end the pregnancy, you could end the pregnancy. Childbirth ends the pregnancy.
Right.
So all pregnancies end.
Right.
And
It's
they should
temporary.
end at childbirth with the birth of a child. Each one of us represents a pregnancy that our mothers carry to term. We were born. And so don't kill the child. Whatever else you do, whether you keep the child, give it up for adoption, whatever you do, the first thing, always first things first. First things first. The first thing is you don't kill the child. Then after that we see, do I keep the child? Do I have my mother raise the child? Do I give it for adoption? Those are further questions. We can see that. But don't kill the child.
Yeah.
That's the primary thing. So this is the greatest illogic.
Yes.
In why I'm going to kill the child because I don't want to give it up for adoption.
You know, our bishops here in America, after Evangelium Vitae by John Paul II came out, wrote a document called Living the Gospel of Life. So it was kind of the American version of how do we apply this here. It's called Living the Gospel of Life. And one of the key phrases in there really gets to what you're saying, and I think it's so important for us as Catholics training our own children, is that our bishop said, the first premise is this, that we don't kill innocent human beings, any place, anywhere, anytime. Neither are we accomplices or accessories to this. And that second part is very important, because there's a lot of people driving people to abortion mills or saying, here's the position, but you have to do what you have to do. You're really an accomplice in this thing when you think about it. And just that clarity, we never kill or accompany those, killing, have any part in the killing of an innocent human being anywhere, any place, anytime. I mean, it's just straightforward. We just need to have that so that when this time comes and you're caught in the trap and you want to bite your leg off to get out of the trap because now you're pregnant or you impregnated somebody or it's your kid or your grandkid, you have to say, no, this is the premise. I have to have clarity about this premise. Somehow we'll make a way to this, but we can't kill.
I think sometimes the conversation that's had in many Catholic and Christian homes in general is don't have sex. You don't get into trouble, period.
Yeah.
You don't. And so the message, sadly, that a lot of young women get is, if they make a mistake and they get into a relationship that they shouldn't be in and they get pregnant, I can't let anyone know that I went against the first rule. And so we find that at many Catholic and Christian colleges, sometimes abortion rates are actually higher because those young women don't dare go home to mom and dad and say, there's a child.
We got to do better at having the conversation.
Yeah, so you've got to have both conversations.
Yeah, you do. Let's pause at this point. The book is Understanding Abortion. The website, Mixed Feelings About Abortion, abortion.com. And also, Dr. Schwartz has written some guidelines that can come to you if you just solicit them, and he can email those to you to help guide you in your conversations in this whole sensitive area of abortion. We'll be right back. Please don't go away.
Welcome back. Well, you are an important part of our EWTN family, and we would love for you to join us live right here on At Home. You could be a member of our studio audience, and we would love to have you. All you need to do is contact the EWTN Pilgrimage Department, send them an email, pilgrimages@ewtn.com, give them a jingle at 205-271-2966. Put it on your travel plans and come to Irondale, Alabama, and then go to Hanceville and visit Mother Angelica's resting place. Well, right now we're going to go straight to Rome to hear from Joan. Joan, what do you have for us today?
Well, greetings from Rome to all of you at home. And today and in coming days and weeks, I'm going to do something a little bit different with our segment called Did You Know That? Many of you are in Rome, you're going to be coming to Rome, and I want to tell you about some places I know you are not going to want to miss. Now, did you know that 6 of the 12 apostles are buried in Rome, and 3 of them in St. Peter's? Yes, not just St. Peter, of course, the apostle and the first pope, but St. Simon and Jude are also buried here. And by the way, this is the St. Jude we're always talking about, the one you pray to for hopeless cases and impossible situations in life. Now, in the left-hand transept of the basilica, there's a central altar, and beneath the altar itself is a sarcophagus with the remains of Saints Simon and Jude. And then on either side of the altar are mosaic rounds that depict these saints. Now, the interesting thing is that, of course, Simon, you've heard the name before. We're not talking about Simon Peter. We're talking about Simon the Canaanite, also called Simon the Zealot, because he had a very zealous form of evangelization of the gospel. And Jude is also known as Jude Thaddeus, not to be confused with Judas, the apostle, of course, who betrayed Christ. Now, both of them were known as a team. They were together in Persia doing their evangelization, and they were martyred about the year 65. And St. Jude was beaten to death with a club, and St. Simon, I can't believe I'm telling you this, he was sawed in half. So the instruments of the death of each of these saints are usually depicted with them in art. So pretty amazing information, and I'll be back with some more information about places you'll want to see and further segments of Did You Know That? So God bless, and back to you at home.
Joan, thank you so much. It's a great reminder that all the beauty we see there in Rome is built on the blood of the martyrs. I mentioned earlier Dr. Schwartz's guidelines, pro-life guidelines. You can request a copy. Go to understandingabortion@outlook.com. understandingabortion@outlook.com. Kiki, you bring the message of this book and pro-life training in a seminar. Tell us a little bit about that.
I do. We have a 10-hour seminar based on the book where I go through the moral issues, I go through the pro-choice moral issues, pro-life moral issues, and then the legal issues, and then spend a lot of time on personal stories to kind of see how these things come together in reality. Yeah. So it can be tapered down to a smaller, but the 10-hour seminar really covers all the issues that are important.
So this would be good for wide groups of people, including parishes. You're at Holy Apostles?
I'm at Holy Apostles.
Have you done it there? Because it seems like clergy really need this kind of training and to understand some of the people in their own congregation that might be pro-choice, people coming to them.
Yes, I have given the seminar at Holy Apostles.
Good.
And it's also available on YouTube.
Good. So we hope that if there's seminarians out there, bishops, seminaries themselves, you might want to have Kiki come out and give this excellent training so that our clergy can give good, sound pastoral care and can preach the gospel of life and be very well informed. Doctor, some closing thoughts from you that you might want to share.
My main thought is always this: the reality of the child in the womb, based on the idea of the continuum, that the life in the womb is the first phase of our existence. I was once a baby in my mother's womb. That's a marvelous thought to keep in mind. I was once a baby in my mother's womb. The babies in the womb are one of us. They're part of the human community. And the only differences are that what I mentioned: size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. And that reality of the child is something that we should keep in mind, always in mind and in heart. And when we discuss various issues like the hard cases, abortion and rape, always keep in mind the reality of the child, abortion kills the child. So no matter what else is true, and other things are true, and other things that are true need to be taken seriously, but always on the basis of abortion kills a child. And so even for rape, abortion kills a child. And very often the woman who's been raped doesn't want an abortion. It's other people who want the abortion to get the thing, you know, under the rug. Yeah. And thirdly, if you allow abortion for rape, you're opening the door to any abortion, because you're saying essentially abortion is sometimes justified. Who's going to decide? There's only one answer to that question, the woman, and that's pro-choice. So again, I can't repeat it often enough. The reality of the child, the continuum. I was once a baby in my mother's womb. The only difference is the sled, and the baby in the womb doesn't function as a person, neither does a born baby, but there has the being of a person. We all have the being of a person, and it's the being of a person that needs to be protected and loved.
Dr. Schwartz, Kiki, thank you so much for being with us. It's a wonderful book. I'm sure it's touching many, many people, and may it lead to the salvation of souls, to the saving of human life. Thanks for being with us today on At Home with Jim and Joy. May we all together lift up the gospel of life and know that it will prevail. God bless you. Bye now.